We are increasingly moving into a society between extreme wealth and those who don't have.
Money circulates in the same circles.
There's not a wealth gap, there's a knowledge gap. If you knew everything that I know, there'd be no reason for anyone not to have the same level of wealth. People are going to experience the fact that AI is not just going to take away their job, but their entire industry will disappear.
I read somewhere that you owned over 122 different properties.
I'm an expert in real estate. There's nothing I don't know about my industry. You don't make money in real estate because the value of the property has gone up. You make money in real estate through the devaluation of the debt. I remember people worked so hard, there were ambulances that turned up to the library. Well, are you mad? Right? That was an even further evolution of wealth creation. Right now, we're in a generational buying opportunity. You can learn just as much with £1 as you can £1 million. You don't need any money to sit at the table. What you need to do is...
I hope you guys are excited to get into this episode. Don't forget, if you would like to purchase an investment property in Dubai, make sure to fill out the form below and book a free consultation with me. Welcome to the Building Wealth with No Borders podcast with me, Lamide Elizabeth, where I'll be bringing you guests from around the world to share their strategies on building wealth. And today we are in London. We are filming at Myriad Studios, so make sure you check them out if you're looking for a professional and reliable studio. And we are here with the founder of Anteros Partners, where he was able to build a real estate pipeline of over $115 million by age 13. He's an investor and he is a speaker. Welcome to the podcast, James Gerrard.
Hey, Lamide, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
I'm really excited. Thank you for coming. So I would let you introduce yourself. How would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I was raised by wolves and then no. So yes, as you mentioned, I built, by the time I was 28 years old, a property development business which had a GDV of $115 million. I started that when I was about 23, 24 years old. By the time I was 28, we were one of the youngest Property Week Award winners ever. So we got a lot of industry recognition. And we were doing basically new build development. So we were doing a lot of developments in East London. We were buying brownfield sites, getting planning permission, raising capital, developing out those sites, and then selling them or holding them. And then after I exited that business from 2018 to 2021, because we had 7 or 8 different assets that took time to exit, I then took some time out, got married, kids, started to think, right, rather than being dragged into something and feeling like I'm on a hamster wheel, because that period of building that business did almost kill me, I decided let's take some time out and then choose how I was going to build my wealth moving forward. And so after that, I decided that I no longer wanted to trade assets. I wanted to move into long-term investment. So I set up an asset management company, and after 18 months, we built that asset management portfolio is about £30 million of assets under management. And now we are expanding on that business, looking to get to 1,000 units by the end of 2027. And that's where we are today.
Amazing. I think one thing I love about when I came across your content is you have really good insights on like building wealth, the gap between like the middle class and the wealthy, a lot of real estate and property market predictions, which I love as well. And I definitely want to dive into all of that. But before we do that, I really want to get a better understanding of what has made you you. So if you could share with us like what your childhood was like, maybe in relation to money, education, that sort of stuff.
Sure. So I always say I was fortunate enough that when I was a teenager, my father went pretty much into bankruptcy. So we ended up selling our house. We lost our home. He was at the point, the company he worked in effectively got very badly damaged by the internet. He used to organize marketing on ticket wallets. So ticket wallets were this envelope that you used to get, that when you bought a plane ticket, they used to post your plane ticket to your house, and it used to come in a wallet, a physical wallet. So he used to actually do the advertising on those envelopes. And so when the internet came along, you no longer needed those physical envelopes. In 1998, the first e-wallets came along. By 2004, every single airline used e-wallet. So not just his job disappeared, but his entire industry disappeared overnight. And so often I feel direct correlations between like where we are now, not just in the internet age, but in the AI. People are going to experience the fact that AI is not just going to take away their job, but their entire industry will disappear. Mm-hmm. And so, coming from that situation of feeling that things are comfortable and then the rug pulled underneath your feet and then not having a home to really call a home, and then going to, I was lucky enough though, I was at LSE, right? So I was able to get to LSE. And then from there, I met my mentor who then gave me a job, and he'd taken 3 real estate development companies public, 2 real estate companies public, 1 tech company public. And so literally being his stooge, at 19 years old, learning with him day in, day night, I benefited from that knowledge of how to build real estate, how to build real estate companies. And from that, a year later, I was then able to build my own business through Anteros. And that's how I then built up the portfolio. But the key for me was identifying somebody who had the knowledge, who was then able to train me, and then I was able to use that knowledge to do it myself. Yeah.
So let's go back to 14-year-old you when your dad lost your business. So what was life like for you when the business was going well? Presumably it was going well before he lost it. And then how did things change when he lost it? And then what sort of things were going on in your mind as that was happening?
Growing up, like, my childhood was very unstable, not just because of the financial part I mentioned just now, but also because of emotional. My dad was an alcoholic, so the home was not necessarily a safe place. It was, violence, there was aggression, and I think that was strange because at the same time I benefited from the unconditional love my father had for me. So for my dad, I was like number one. I could make no mistakes. Yet you never knew that whether you're getting Jekyll or whether you're getting Hyde. So that instability, both financially but also emotionally, meant that I was so keen, I think, on a subconscious level to create some form of stability for myself. And I found that in real estate. And I found that because seeing my dad's job disappear and his entire industry disappear, I knew that real estate was going to be around forever. Someone would always need a home. And so I knew that by investing my time into that space, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, when I was 18 years old, I knew it was still going to be there. And I think, as I shared, now is a very interesting time for people really to think over the next 20, 30, 40 years, where am I going? And I was lucky that I was conscious enough to make that decision. But if you are in your 20s now, if wherever you are in life, it's really about thinking, what is the industry I want to commit myself to now, which is still going to be around in 20, 30 years,
I want to hone in on you at LSE before you found out about real estate.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you wanted to go to LSE. So for those who may not be from the UK or who may not know what the LSE is, it's the London School of Economics and Political Sciences. It's one of the best universities in the world, one of the best universities for social sciences, and definitely like a leading university in London and in the UK. And they called it like the investment banker pipeline. What did you study at LSE and why did you choose that? And was that also because you wanted some stability?
Yeah. So I wasn't the smartest kid at school, but what I recognized was that I wasn't that great at math and economics, but I was very good at law and history, and that's what I applied to LSE to do. But I wanted to go to LSE to do it because it had the highest employment rate in the country, from universities. And for me, that was the most important thing about university, was getting a job. And what's interesting, which I don't think people get, is that especially now, because when I was growing up, there was such a push for everyone to go to university, and so many people have suffered that they've now got student loans out, they've gone to university and it hasn't paid off. Is that I remember going to job applications, and those firms weren't even accepting people outside of Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, LSE, and Warwick. So if you went to Bristol, Edinburgh, if you went to any other like Leeds, Newcastle, they wouldn't even interview. And so I don't think people realize that those and I interned at Goldman's in my second year as part of their spring. I was lucky enough to get one of those. But I don't think people realize that kind of those top companies, they don't even go down that list. And so when you're looking at universities, looking at your job prospects, the most valuable thing you can do, in my opinion, is develop a knowledge and a skill. A friend of mine at the same time never went to university. By the time he was 21, he already owned 2 apartments in Fulham. He worked for a startup real estate agency. He was hammering the phones, telling people to sell their home for this agency. By the time he was 21, he had enough commission that he was buying his second flat. And he just, he was being paid £18,000 basic, but he learned how to sell. So by the time I got out of university, this kid already had, two apartments and, was way with his career. We got guys now who are, in the plumbing industry and scaffolding, they're making £8,000-10,000 a month. So I think university as a whole isn't necessarily what it's promised, unless you're very specialist in a very particular niche that is, requires that knowledge. But
it's so interesting because I literally just wrote a newsletter. I went out today, and I was kind of sharing my own thoughts of like how I perceive like wealth and money to work, and how as much as if you really want to increase your chances as much as possible, you want to get into the in-group as quickly as possible. And one of the ways that you can do that is through university. So like what I was sharing in that newsletter is that by the time I had graduated, on paper, you couldn't tell excluding my name, including the name, because you have rich people from different countries, but you wouldn't be able to tell if I was a rich kid or not, because I had the grades, I went to the university, and I had the work experience, right? And I was basically saying that in that newspaper that, like, if you're trying to optimize your chances as much as possible and you're going to go down the education route because you have to, and people don't like when I say this, or when people say this in general about what you were saying about like those top 6 universities and how things can, and it's not that you cannot be successful if you don't go to them, because obviously we know that's not true. But then when it does come to, if you're trying to like get into some of the top firms, top law firms in these top industries, they are very like, they won't even, and the thing is, they write it in publicly that if you are not going to any of these universities, don't even bother applying. And it's like, you can have an extremely smart person that goes to, and I said in the newsletter, I was like, you're actually, in my opinion, in certain ways, you're better off studying music at Oxford than you are doing like biology at some university that is not well respected. Because, and after a while, once you leave university, and this is what one of my mentors taught me that I met whilst I was at university. She was just like, when you leave uni, no one ever really, I'm asking you what your course is, but people don't really ask you what course you study.
I think you're like the first person ever to ask me that.
Yeah, like no one asks. They just say, what uni did you go to? Even when it comes to like working at certain companies, right? They don't, you say, oh, I worked at Facebook. They're not going to be like, oh, what exact division did you? No one really cares. Like, just the name carries you. So that's something that I found quite
and that's kind of like the point I wanted to make to listeners, especially those guys who think about, young enough to think about that area of their life, was that I went in for history, then the additional law modules, right? But the whole point was I knew I needed to get to the best university, right? And I mean, LSE actually was ranked like number 1 in the country for history, but that was the whole gambit.
Can I ask you, how did being at LSE, if it did, shape your perception on money, the world, wealth?
Yeah. Well, Gary Stevenson talks about this quite a lot, because he was a few years older than me at LSE, and I remember the training game and all that. And I remember getting there and just like, pleased I was there. I was happy to be there. And I turn up, and his kid's got like his 3rd company, and he just started like an internship with like JP Morgan and Credit Suisse. I'm like, how did you get that? Like, how does that even work? And so I was blown away that suddenly these like crazy students were already applying for like top investment banking jobs and everything. And I was just there for like a good time, And then suddenly I'm just like, what is everyone up? So for me, in terms of the way it shaped everything, was I just had to raise my game. And I think it goes back to what you were saying in terms of the group of people you're in. That's the biggest thing. Your average is 5 people you spend most time around. And for me, not that I knew this at the time, but just by immersing myself around really the kind of most hungry, driven, probably slightly sadistic group of like, it's like, who, I remember people worked so hard. There were ambulances that turned up to the library because it was a 24-hour library and people had gone home for 3 days. So that was the nature of the place. And it was so driven. It was so hungry. There were people coming from abroad who their parents had given everything, £40,000 a year to send them there. They were coming here for one reason only, and that was to be the best. That's why they went there. And so for me, not understanding what the next stage of the game was, because I didn't have that knowledge, it was a real shock, and I had to learn very, very quickly. And I think actually going there, I remember, with a combination of what was happening in my family life, everything, and then going to a big city. I was, from a village in like southwest of England. This was like nuts. I always remember taking my A to Z out back then, like trying to wonder out how do I get to like Holborn, and I was very depressed. I got very depressed. I was drinking a lot. It was bad, that was definitely ground zero.
So interesting. I think let me not go into that. But what I was going to say is, so in terms of that question that I just asked you, LSE 100 changed a lot of how I saw the world. I think LSE in general, so I grew up in Hackney, and so I came from a very working class background, and everyone kind of thought the same way. It didn't matter if you were black, white, whatever. We were all kind of more or less a low socioeconomic background. So we all thought the same with regards to like politics and economics. And I remember getting to LSE, and it challenged a lot of that, because I saw people from different backgrounds with just different ways of thinking, but were also very intelligent in the way that they were expressing it. And I remember in LSE 100, so LSE 100 is this thing that doesn't contribute to your final grade, but we all have to do it because they want us to be a more well-rounded individual. I don't know. I think, the story is actually that apparently certain like firms were complaining that LSE students were too
Narrow-minded. Yeah.
So that's why.
Go figure.
Did they tell you that as well?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So that was the story. But one of the things that we came across during LSE 100 was this idea of like a wicked problem. So it was this thing where we were basically we were looking at like, I think it was like environmental, social, economic and political issues, very much LSE, and different groups were given like, I guess, almost different things to argue for. And what the conclusion was, as one group would present their solution, to present the problem and present their solution, the other group would identify why whatever solution that they were going to provide was going to basically create another problem.
Right.
And so the idea of a wicked problem is something that you can't fully define, but also you can't fully solve, because with every solution that you come up with, it will create a problem elsewhere.
Right.
And that's kind of how, this is a little bit off topic, but a little bit on topic. It's how I start to see certain like social, political, economic issues that like people are very much like, no, if this government comes into play, then they're going to solve everything. And it's like, yeah, whatever policies that they put in place, it might solve X, Y, Z, but then you'd probably have another couple of other issues that will pop up because of it. And I think it just really altered my mind on like, I don't know, there's never really like not all problems have a perfect solution.
Look, I think the takeaway from that LSE story is a few things. Number one, that LSE was a grafting place, and no matter where you came from, no matter what demographic, there was a place for you. Yeah, the difference was that people wanted it. Yeah, that was number one. You wanted it. You wanted to go to LSE. That was the key. And so people who have goals in life, it might be to get rich, create wealth, whatever it is. If that's not your goal and you're willing to sacrifice everything to get there, guess what? Someone who will. And I remember someone sharing with me a long time ago, they said, James, if you want to have money, you can have money. If you want to be rich, you can have riches. But you've got to want it more than anyone else. And you've got to sacrifice everything else more to get that. And I don't necessarily feel that's totally true and holistically, but it highlights the point that it starts with what you want. And unless you even want it, you're not going to ask the questions or make the movements to even getting there. And I think the second point is to take away that if you are someone who wants a certain level of success, and no matter what you are doing, you've got to seek out the people who are at the top of their game in that thing. You know, it was the eye-opening moment for me that I could have gone to 100 different universities. I went to that one and I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were doing things 10 times bigger, faster, more successful than I was. And suddenly it opened my eyes to what was possible, the metric in which I should be measuring my success in that limited capacity. But also, therefore, I could do it because I could see people doing it. And again, there's not a wealth gap, there's a knowledge gap. If you knew everything that I know, if you knew all the people that I know, if you knew all the strategies that I know in terms of how to create wealth, there'd be no reason for anyone not to have the same level of wealth. Then it would just come down to choice. The truth is that so many of us are just denied that knowledge because actually we didn't even know to begin with, starting 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that was the game. And I often compare it to boxing. You look at Tyson Fury, heavyweight champion of the world, former heavyweight champion of the world. At 4 years old, he knew he was going to be, and his father was pushing him to be a world champion boxer. Imagine the advantage anyone would have that if you wanted to be the best stock trader in the world, at 4 years old, you were positioned to do that, right? And your whole environment was around pushing you. He had that in boxing, right? So if you go young enough and you start, you're always going to have an advantage of the compound effect to that. I think the advantage that I had was that I learned very powerful lessons because of the family situation I grew up in, that I was able to learn things very quickly at a younger age that sometimes takes people a lot more pain later on down their life to know. You know?
I love that. The first thing I love that you said is that, and you started with it when you said that you were fortunate enough to have gone through what you went through with your dad's business. And the reason why I think that framing is so important is because a lot of people would use a situation like that as the exact reason why they cannot do this and that, because, oh, I'm just so scarred, and oh, this, oh, that. And I love, because this is one thing that I always say, because that's kind of like your unfair advantage. That's not something that you can replicate, right? That's something that you have went through that was particular to you, that you took that and you said, because of this, I have now created XYZ. But you've mentioned that, like, you know, seeking out the people who are at the top of your industry. So how did you meet this billionaire mentor whilst you were at LSE?
Well, I think just to add what you said is that the ability to look through the illusion of challenges and see them as opportunities, and the speed in which you can do that is one of the critical paths to success. You know, it's not just the fact that eventually you get there. And if anyone at home right now is thinking of a challenge they've gone through in life, it's not about the fact that you look back a year, 10 years later, and you think, oh, thank God that happened to me. I learned so much from that situation. Some people never do that. Some people it takes a year, 2 years, 10 years. But imagine in the moment, or going through a challenge or something that isn't working out the way you want it to. And in that moment, being not just accepting, but excited. Because you know that that challenge is the very thing that is helping you become the person that you need to be to get the thing that you want. It's that space that you're closing down. So when you get challenged, you're so excited because you know you're literally closing down that space between where you are and the success you want to achieve through that challenge. And so if you have that mindset, the ability to turn challenge into opportunity out of choice, you move at a much faster pace and your success is accelerated because you're not holding on to the past or what if this, what if that, blah, 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 blah. And you're not lowering yourself, you're constantly moving forward. And I think that is one of the, if I look at any of the kind of people that I work with, we have because of the nature of our business, we have a number of multi-millionaire, billionaire investors. Their nature is that their mindset does not shift. There's no good nor bad. They treat both imposters just the same. Everything is fundamentally an opportunity to move forward.
That's good.
Yeah.
So how did you meet the billionaire mentor?
So I was door knocking. So after I was after I went through that period, as I mentioned, I get very much hit like rock bottom. I started that my first step was really just going to the gym, trying to get some form of like stability and consistency back into my life. And then at that point I started printing off CVs. And at one point the summer before I was interning at Goldman's, the next summer, I didn't have anything. Just because where I was mentally. And so I printed off my CV. I started making a list of like financial PR firms, marketing agencies, wealth managers, anything really, absolutely anything, and just handing out CVs. And eventually a friend of mine introduced me to someone who was working at this company. And this was the millionaire mentor who was growing his fourth company. I remember handing my CV. He called me for an interview. I knocked on the door. He came out in his Gucci glasses. It was the middle of summer. Gucci glasses, big collar shirt, Gucci shoes. And he said, "Hi, I'm X." I took my last 3 companies public from my kitchen table. I want to do it a 4th time. Do you want to come join me? And, I was 20 odd years old. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I was like, don't ask about pay. But that was how. But then to break that down, I had to go through a couple of interviews. And what got me? LSE got me in there. And the fact that I interned at Goldman's the previous summer, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea always was never necessarily to be the best within that bunch, but it was always just to get the name on the CV till I got to opens doors. And so that was part of it.
So what was this was an internship? What was that internship
like? So I was I was interning with the guy, and then during that process it was a summer internship. It came to the end. He then offered me a job. I then didn't go back to LSE. I started working with him. I took a year out. I became very close to him. I then ended up becoming head of the investor relations for raising capital, basically. Within a year, we raised about 55 million in our first year investing to prime central London. Back then, London was the hottest property out there. It was, again, being in the right market is so important. One Hyde Park, selling assets at £10,000 a square foot, the most expensive, real estate in the world. And and then after a year, I decided to go back to LSE, finish my degree. Always important to finish things that you start. And but while I was there, and it's the biggest opportunity again, I had no pressure. I didn't need to make a huge amount of money. I had very low overheads. We have student loans. And so while I was there, I not only completed my degree, but I set up my finance broking firm, which basically introduced not just the capital that I'd raised for the previous developer that I was working with, but now said, look, I can introduce money to hundreds of developers and I'll take a fee or a margin. So then I started raising money for developers all across.
So you finished your second year, then you went to work for this guy, decided that you didn't want to go, you was going to defer your final year at LSE.
Things were kicking off with the guy. So I was like, I'm not going back. Like, this is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
I want to learn more. I was also lucky that there were changes, let's say, within the business, which allowed an opportunity for me to accelerate faster. Yeah.
So then when you went back to finish your final year, did you leave with the job with him?
Yeah. So then I said, look, I need to go back to university. Not need to, but I want to. But then while I was at university, right, with a little bit more perspective, a little bit more of understanding, this is not the end of the world, whether you get a degree or not. What was amazing was that, he took me around, the top table, right? He was raising, not only is he someone who'd taken 3 companies public, but he'd raised money from, household billionaires that you would know of, so I was holding those meetings, I was organizing those meetings. And, one of the big lessons I remember from him early doors was I turned up my desk one morning and he had the Times rich list. And he said, please organize a meeting with circle, 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 and Times Rich, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, like, how am I going to, what, were you mad? Like, what do I do? Like, call him up. I'm like, hey, Richard, how you doing, mate? Like, fancy a meeting next week. So what was amazing for me was the understanding that this was a man who had tremendous entrepreneurial success. And for him, there were no boundaries. This is something I want. This is something that's going to be achieved. Work out a way of doing it, right? And so something that was so beyond my mind, it literally broke my mind. Is that's not possible. I can't do that. Blah blah blah. I had an internal reaction to that. For him, there were no boundaries. There was no can't. There was no couldn't. And I think that's a major mental growth for a lot of people starting their business or looking to be wealth creators. Is that everyone has a limit of I don't think that's possible. And I was growing with someone who didn't have that mindset. I was growing with someone, there were no boundaries. I mean, I'm sure he does eventually, but that was my biggest takeaway, that anything could be achieved.
That's it.
You just have to go for it. Yeah.
So now explain to me more about, so I'm guessing this financial brokerage that you set up in your final year of LSE was a part of how you built your wealth. So what exactly was you doing?
Yeah. So someone will come along to me and they say, James, I've got a site in London. I need 5 million quid. I need for development financing. And so back then, by that time, I knew all the banks, I knew all the lenders, I knew all the lending firms, because you have banks, you have debt companies, you have debt funds, you have all sorts of different types of capital. And then I also knew, several ultra high net worth individuals and investors, because again, you're in the right market. You're dealing with prime central London real estate. That was the market. So anyone who's buying a prime central London house is a multi-millionaire. Anyone doing a prime central London development is a multi-millionaire. So you're in a market where you're just surrounded by multi-millionaires, or more. And London is the center of global wealth was certainly back then. So I'm around all that capital, and what they wanted was opportunities. They wanted opportunities to deploy their capital, and I was the facilitator between the people with the money and the people with the opportunities. And I always say to people, especially in real estate, but I imagine this applies to everything, is that there are three reasons why you get to sit at the table. You've got the deal, you've got the money, or you're the broker introducing the two parties together. And only two of those people don't have any money. Only one of those people has any money. So there are two seats at the table where you don't need any money to sit at the table. What you need to do is have knowledge of a network or knowledge how to do something. If you have both, and then eventually when you have all three, as you become more successful, more wealthy, then you get more of the pie. But you can start off as a broker, and many very successful developers do. They start off as a real estate agent. They start off as a mortgage broker. They start off as a finance broker. They start off as a whatever broker. What are they doing? They're building knowledge, so that when they come to put their own money down, they know that that's a deal. They know that that's an opportunity because they spent 10 years broking other people's deals. So that's.
I wish I knew this at the age that you knew it, because it's something that I'm starting to know now and it's so interesting. And this is something, did I write a newsletter about this? I might have, but I was saying that now, especially through the podcast, but just in general through networking, where I've built up a network of multimillionaires, there's ways that I've been able to make money by just introducing people over WhatsApp. Like, oh, do you know someone who does this? I'm like, oh yeah, this person. They're like, okay, cool. I'm going to take this, and this. And then if this goes through, then you're going to get a cut of X, Y, Z. And obviously what they're doing is at a much bigger, the value of it is huge. Yeah. That even if you just get a small percentage of that.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is such a hack.
Yeah.
This is such a hack, but you have to break into the circles first to be able to do that, because money circulates in the same circles. That's the lessons that I've been learning.
Yeah. I mean, if you take the extreme of broking, it's M&A, investment banking, right? It's like ultimately the banks don't, in that transaction don't have the money, but what they're doing is they're putting a buyer and a seller together. They're creating a money market, So yeah, it's big business. But as you say, I think the challenge with it, eventually you get to a point in your life where you want more control. So you work very hard to put a deal together, and then the investor doesn't invest, or the operator doesn't perform, or pulls out of bed, and suddenly you're not the captain of your ship. And so, I'm a big believer that you need to be the cause of your life, and the more that you are bringing in internally, that when you move, things happen, and you're not reliant on third parties for your own destiny, the less an effect of people around you are, and then you can be more in control and actually carve out your own purpose and your own destiny. But that's why people tend to move out of broking and then move into ownership or operations, because you're just a lot more in control.
If you're enjoying this content, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you would like to become an international property investor in Dubai or in the UK, the link to book a free consultation will be in the description box below. If you're not quite ready to invest yet, check out the affordable video courses that will also be linked in the description box below. And if you would like to relocate to Dubai, set up your business in Dubai, or anything else related to relocating to Dubai, check out www.theprofessionalnetwork.com. Speaking of which, one of the videos that caught my attention was of you outside of Tesco, and you were like, he was like, I'm renting out this building to Tesco, whatever. So, how did you come about that? So I'm guessing this is when you started moving towards ownership, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about that?
So my ownership journey started after a couple of years of broking. I then thought, why am I raising money for everybody else? I can raise money for myself. And I was, 23, 24 when that started. That's when we started building out our development pipeline. And as I said, began to sell out of that when I was 28. So the Tesco deal, I mean, that's a great, that was an even further evolution of wealth creation. So then I moved away from being the operator to be the actual investor and the owner in my own right. So, that transaction, a bank was taking an asset into receivership, before receivership, they were calling in the loan. I knew that was happening. So I basically got a very good price on the commercial land because the developer couldn't pay back the development lender. But before I actually completed, I also knew, because of my contacts in retail, I knew that Tesco wanted a commercial space in that area for that square footage. So even before I'd exchanged on the property, I'd already lined up a contract with Tesco. So by the time I had exchanged, I simultaneously exchanged Tesco, the purchase of the property. So when you have that, it sends the commercial value much, much higher. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into that, but that's
good. It's good because the follow-up question I wanted to ask is like, because people will hear that and they're like, okay, I should get into commercial real estate.
Yeah.
From your standpoint, if someone is looking at weighing up going into commercial real estate versus residential real estate, what would you say?
Yeah. So that's a big question. We can go a lot of depth on that. So I think if people are weighing up whether commercial or residential, they're very different types of strategy. And I would say that commercial is actually more complex, not because of an operational point of view, but from a valuation point of view. So as an example, that commercial play I had was that if I had, Lamide Enterprises Limited renting that space off me, I would not get the same kind of value for it as I would Tesco, right? And so understanding why I wouldn't, and understanding the yield in which I would apply and how yield works, depending on which company operates and has a lease on that building and for how long for, are all ways that determine the value of that property in commercial, right? So as an extreme, Tesco taking a 15-year lease with no break and taking a compounding rent which rises with inflation is much more valuable even than a Tesco with a 15-year lease that breaks in 5 years and doesn't rise with RPI. As an example, right? So that technicality, which maybe I've lost a lot of viewers right now even talking about, right, is a whole level of understanding. But operationally, it's very easy because once that deal's done, I don't touch it for 15 years. Whereas residential, I've got a tenant, they've got to leave after a year, I've got to negotiate the rent, blah, blah, blah. They've torn up the place. You have none of that with commercial. So in terms of like what people are interested to in terms of getting involved with, residential has got the lowest barrier to entry because you understand how to value residential. In fact, many people don't really, but that people can get their head around that. Whereas commercial is a little bit more complicated, takes a little bit more effort. But if you are willing to put in the knowledge, then commercial is a fantastic tool to your armory. But it's much more affected by macroeconomic factors. So because you value commercial off yield, if the interest rate goes through the roof, your commercial is worthless. Whereas your residential property, is still going to hold a degree of its value because it's not valued on a yield basis. It's valued more on a capital value point of view, right? Which I can go into all this.
But on your point remember you said you wanted to go into real estate for stability.
Yeah.
Residential would do that more than commercial, right? Or would it depend on what type of commercial?
Yes. So I think ultimately you want a balanced portfolio. So you want, the great thing about commercial is income, right? So you can have assets that are yielding you 10 to 15% gross. So I buy something for £1 million is bringing in £150,000 a year income without very little effort, right? So when you get very wealthy family offices tend to buy more commercial. Big institutions buy more commercial because it's easier to deploy large sums of money. Whereas residential is much more fractional. It takes a lot more operations. It takes much more labor and time. So it's much less passive than commercial. But people want their money to work harder, so they go into residential first. Yeah.
I read somewhere that you owned, or maybe you said it yourself, that, over 122 different properties. So some people will hear that and think, okay, if he is buying up property, I should also be buying property. If there was, let's say the average viewer is maybe earning £70,000 a year, looking to put some of that extra income into property, do you think this is a good time to get into the property market in the UK, for example?
So right now we're in a generational buying opportunity. So when I launched our asset management company in 2022, I started making acquisitions the moment that Liz Truss collapsed, the bond market, and yields went crazy and everyone's mortgages shot up. And so that was the point at which I started going out and actually buying properties at that point in time. And it kind of, again, goes back to the point we were making earlier, that your ability to look through the illusion of challenges and obstacles and to see opportunity is a big defining, factor of creating wealth. Had I at that point in time gone, oh my God, rates have gone crazy, it's the end of the world, I would have missed the opportunity. So that buying opportunity started in 2022. We're now obviously coming to the end of that buying opportunity because rates are coming down. But the reality is, what I wrote to our investors back in 22 and my partners was, we're now at a fundamental reframing of how we value real estate. And what I mean by that is that for so long, people think that at home they value their property based on what their neighbor sold it for. The better way to look at property in terms of an investment point of view is to look at what is the income that I'm getting from the property. In Victorian times, before couples got married off to one another, the father, because the patriarchal system at the time, the father used to ask the incoming husband, what is your income? Not how much you're worth. What is your income? What are you actually getting in monthly? Because back then, there were people with land and lots of properties or whatever. It's like, great, you've got lots of wealth, but actually, how much income are you getting from it? And so that's a much better way to understand your wealth and to understand the value of real estate. Like a lot of people in Mayfair right now, have £10 million houses on paper, you can't sell those. The market has collapsed. In terms of once adjusted for inflation, the market's gone down 38% since 2014 to now. So in their mind, they think they're wealthy, but they can only get a 2% yield on that. So if you've got, £1 million property, at the moment, you're only getting £20,000 income from that property, which is nothing, right? Whereas you can, for instance, buy a £1 million property and be making £100,000 a year income. Now that's some proper yield. And so the way the market is going in a high inflationary environment is that when inflation is zero, okay, it doesn't matter if you get 2% on your money a year. But when inflation is 5%, right, now you've got to beat inflation and you've got to make money. So if you're only getting 5% on your money, you're not beating inflation. You're not actually making any money. You haven't improved your buying power. And so the reason why the real estate market is changing is because it's not good enough just to get a buy-to-let property and assume that the property market is going to go up 4% and you're going to make some money out of that. With inflation, it cancels it out. So now it's much better to understand real estate on an income point of view. Whatever you're buying is, what income can I get from that asset? And then based on the income I'm getting, is it worth it? And that's where the real estate market is shifting. You're getting massive institutional capital coming into the market. Residential property is going to be a product, just like commercial. And you're going to get the institutionalization of the residential housing market. And it's going to send prices in the long term sky high. Because for the first time, with the technology that we have, Blackstone, as an example, who bought 5,400 homes in the northeast of England, putting in 1.3 billion, right? They move the market. When the Canadian Pension Fund goes in and puts in £1 billion, when the South Korean National Pension Trust puts in half a billion, all these massive institutions piling in hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds into the residential housing market. Why? Because they value it on yield. They value it based on inflation. They know that rents always increase above inflation. So it's a massive inflation hedge for them. And so when that amount of money starts to value assets, our homes, our residential homes where we want to live, as an investment tool, and they start valuing it on yield, that's when the whole market changes, because they start determining on how the valuation of property is going. So right now we all value property based on what our neighbor pays for it. 10, 15, 20 years, you'll just look at it on the basis of income.
So then if you're a DIY landlord, right, in a market where institutional investors are now kind of making the market, isn't that higher risk or is that an opportunity?
Yeah, so for your regular buy-to-let landlord, what the government's doing with increasing legislation is to effectively commercialize that industry. So they're trying to get rid of now, small landlords, mom and pops landlords, which is a real shame because so many people invested in that asset class for their pension. And when they were told to do it 40 years ago, it was a great thing to do. And now they've got a problem. And so is it an opportunity for small scale landlords? If they're buying the right stuff, yes, it is. But you've got to follow the smart money. You've got to know what the Blackstones, what the Brookfields of the world are investing into, what they're wanting to invest into, and where that money's going to go. But yeah, it's a generational buying opportunity right now. Rates are still high. People are still a lot of distress in the market. People want to sell. It's a good time to get involved. But that window is closing.
Do you still believe property is one of the best ways to build passive income?
I think it depends on how much money you have. If you got 100 million in the bank or, within your portfolio, gilts are a great thing. You don't pay CGT when you sell them. If you've got 100 grand in your bank account, I think that property is an amazing way in which you can double or triple your capital relative to the risk that you take.
So let's get into that. So we've had a couple property entrepreneurs on the channel. We've had one guy who does a lot of like flips, so I'm sure you know what that is. And we had another guy, Max Maxwell, who I can't remember what it's an American term. I don't remember what it is, but you're buying a property like massively undervalued. You get it under contracts, and then you basically find a buyer for it. They pay you more than you paid for it, and then you kind of like take a cut from that. I can't remember the exact word for it, but both of them were basically like, property was great and it was kind of how I made my money, but there are much better places to put your money to get a better return. And so some of the comment sections were kind of confused, like, but you guys have made your money through property, but then you're saying it's not the best way to get a return on your money. Like, we're confused. Where would you stand on that?
If you look at the wealthiest people in society, they park their money into assets, or they park their money into funds that own real estate assets, right? So real estate as a long-term hedge against inflation is one of the best asset classes to invest into. And I think that maybe people say that because they don't understand actually how you make money in real estate. Because you don't make money in real estate because the value of the property has necessarily gone up. You make money in real estate, or you create wealth in real estate because of the devaluation of the currency that you've borrowed in. If you have £1 million property or whatever property you have, right, and you borrow £500,000, that £500,000 is fixed in terms of its value. It's the interest you pay is then serviced by the tenant. If that property increases in value, let's say 20% across 10 years, 2% per annum, then you've got a £1.2 million asset, but your debt is still £500,000. So you've created £200,000 on a £500,000 equity investment. So you made 40%. If you owned that same asset for £1 million and you had no debt on it, and the same thing happened and it went to 1.2 million in 10 years time, but you had no debt, and you made 20%, but inflation anyway was 2%, you've made no money. Right? And so you don't make money in real estate because the value of the property has gone up. You make money in real estate through the devaluation of the debt. And so when people talk about, I don't know, but there are other asset classes to invest into. What they don't fully appreciate is the devaluation of your currency over a period of time, and also the challenge in reinvesting your money once you've got your money out. The beautiful thing about real estate is you can do one deal and you can own that same asset for 20 years, 30 years, and the same devaluation of the currency is happening. And so once you then get the compound effect of increasing rents, whether it be commercial or residential, plus the devaluation of the debt that you've borrowed it, plus hopefully the capital appreciation through the inflation of the actual asset as well, there's nothing like it.
And I think that's one of the reasons why interest-only mortgages in the UK, I think, are a huge advantage. Because and it's so funny because a lot of people don't like the interest-only mortgages. I'm talking about for regular, like if you're buying a HMO or residential, whatever, they don't like it because they're so used to the idea of like, if I get a mortgage, I should pay everything down, like I want to have it all paid off and whatever. And so they don't understand the concept that actually after the like 25 years, for example, I've only paid interest and I'm going to have this huge lump sum to pay back. And it's like, but that £75,000 in 25 years, how much is that going to cost relative to the amount that you've made? So that's interesting. I want to quickly go into two final things. you mentioned that the middle class is dead.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So we are increasingly moving into a society between extreme wealth and those who don't have.
Mm.
And the way that I position it is more like a drawbridge. On one side of the drawbridge, which is going up and up every single day, life is getting easier and easier and easier for people. People with wealth and assets, they're making more and more income from those assets, and they're using that passive income to buy more and more assets. As they buy more and more assets, they get more and more income, and that drawbridge goes up and up and up, and life gets easier and easier, like a downward slalom, right? On the other side, as that drawbridge goes up, life is getting harder and harder and harder. Inflation is going up, cost of living is going up. The cost of the same thing that last year is 4% more this year, probably 10% more. And so whilst the taxation that's also being put on is increasing, and the ability for people to jump from that side of the drawbridge to the other side of the drawbridge, from a life, of containment, of financial hardship and self-doubt, to a life of abundance, security and wealth, is becoming harder and harder because of one, of the taxation system, one because of increased inflation, one because of demographics, and one because of technology. The same thing that wiped out my dad in his job is the same thing that's coming around again. So whilst there are opportunities, the opportunities for those people aren't for everyone. AI is going to reduce the workforce. It's not going to empower everyone to become an Elon Musk. It's going to empower a few people to become Elon Musk. And if you look at how taxes are collected, why did you have the death of the high street? Amazon. Why did you have the death of the music industry? Because of Spotify. So in the same way, the internet, cinemas, and all the people who used to work in cinemas. So same we had the death of so many industries that, when I was growing up, we're going to get a new death for a whole many other industries. And the truth is the middle class operated in those industries. And so we're going to get an extremeness. And because we don't understand how to tax the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world, there's no way to redistribute that capital.
I love this. So how, if you are on the side of the drawbridge, if someone watching this is on the side of the drawbridge where they feel like they're in that financial hardship and they don't feel like they're, they're on the other side, the side of financial abundance, how do they bridge that gap? Can they move over to the other side, and what do they need to do?
Sure. So in my mind, there's three stages. I call it the jump, right? You need to jump from one side to the other. And it's the same thing with anything in life. There's mindset, knowledge, and action. First of all, you have to believe that you can make the jump. You have to believe that you can become wealthy, that it is an option to you. Because if you don't believe, you will never go out and acquire the knowledge. You will never learn how to do it. You never ask the right questions. You never go to the right rooms. You never surround yourself with the right people. And the second thing is getting the knowledge. So the first thing is mindset. The second thing is knowledge. Then you've got to acquire the knowledge of how to build wealth. For me, I found a mentor very young who equipped me with the knowledge of how to build wealth very young. And I was very lucky with that. But I was also lucky by the fact that I went through all those challenges beforehand that meant that I had to go out and find that person, right? So once you get that knowledge, now you know how to make the jump. I've got this real estate strategy. I've got that entrepreneurial strategy. I've got this way to make money. I've got that way to make money. And there are a million ways to make money. And then the last thing is take the action, do it. Do it, go for it, make mistakes, fall on your face, but keep on going. And obviously the sooner you start, the better. Obviously, if you're older and you're listening to this, then you're lucky the fact that you started before a lot of this, before it became harder and harder and harder to do it. But if you're a young person, there are 4 kind of industries that I would position myself in. That's real estate. Number one, everyone's going to need a home. And we have a severe shortage, especially in this country, an ability to make to build homes. The second thing is renewable energy. The third thing is health tech. And the fourth thing is technology as a whole, AI or offshoots of it. And, you don't need to be the creator of these industries. You could be in a marketing agency, but you're using marketing to market companies in those spaces. You could be great. You could be terrible at math or whatever it is, but you're a great salesperson. Well, great. Don't go to a vacuum cleaning company. Go to a renewable energy company and sell free energy. Go to a real estate company and sell prime central London real estate. Real estate is a great example. Don't go to Hull and start selling houses in Hull. If you're a great salesperson, go to central London, sleep on a couch for 6 months and sell prime central London property. It's the same 1%. So it's about positioning yourself in the biggest stream of wealth you possibly can, and understanding where those streams of wealth are. One of the first things I did, why did I go to LSE? We never taught London. I needed to be in London. I never understood the idea that friends were going, to different parts of the country where they've got the GDP less of Mississippi, right? When you would go to London, which is one of the greatest global cities in the world with all the floods of capital, with all the opportunity and everything, yeah, it's more expensive, right? Yeah, I lived in a box. My bed wasn't even on the floor. It was a piece of wood that the landlord had inserted into the wall where I climbed up, and I slept on a ledge while I had a desk underneath. I literally could not even swing a cat in it. It was £60 a week. Like you find a way, but the point is you sit in the kitchen, right? You sit there with the heat and you surround yourself with the opportunity, because that's the place to be. And the better the place to be, the more heat that there is, because everyone wants to be in that kitchen, and that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. So mindset, knowledge, and action.
So good. So good. So we are going to be moving on to the Wealth Woes segment, which is a section where one of the listeners sends in a dilemma and they just want to hear your opinion on what they should do. So this person says, I'm looking to get into property investing, but I can't afford to put down a lot of capital right now. Are REITs worth investing in? And what's the best way to invest in REITs? What do you think?
So for me personally, I think if you can get a well-diversified REIT, they're always very valuable as a first initial exposure to real estate. Mm-hmm. Personally, if you're interested in your own exposure to real estate, is the best asset class to be investing in directly. So the challenge most people have is they have a knowledge gap, obviously, in what is the right situation to be able to invest in terms of real estate. And the best thing you can do, really, if you're looking to get long-term exposure to real estate, is to go and acquire that knowledge through either working with someone or by partnering with someone who's already actively investing into real estate. And what you then benefit is you get the leverage, not just of the debt, but you get the leverage of working with somebody else's equity. So what people often don't realize is that the reason why you make super returns in real estate is not by, say, for instance, getting 75% leverage against a property that you buy. So if you buy a £100,000 property, you borrow £75,000. Is that if you put that deal together, you can also borrow the £25,000 of equity you put in as well. Or you might want to co-invest with someone, but not maybe on a 50-50. Maybe you take 30% of the share and you only put in 10% of the money. So the REITs are a great way of getting initial exposure, beginning to understand how that asset class works. But if you want to get super returns in real estate, it's about actually becoming the operator and understanding exactly what is a deal and how do I invest my capital into that deal. And you don't really need a lot of money to be able to do that. You just need enough to, as I said, to partner with somebody else who can put in the majority of capital. I
know the questions that they're going to be asking is, but how do I find someone else to do that?
Right. So that's a good question. So the best way of finding someone else to do that is obviously by occupying spaces where there are other people who are interested in your strategy. So the benefit is right now is there are so many different groups out there of property interested groups, of property workshops, of property network groups. And it's all about joining those, immersing yourself into that network, immersing yourself into that community. When I started, I met a mentor who had taken 3 real estate development companies public. And I went to go work with him. I was literally his stooge. I was working for £6 an hour, for 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. But what I was able to gain from him was all that knowledge of taking 3 real estate development companies public. And because I was immersed into that situation, immersed into his network, I was able to obviously meet people, who are equally interested in co-investing, into doing property deals, etc. But I think that if you are part-time and you're not looking to fully get involved in this, then the easiest thing you can do really is to join a property network groups, of which there are literally thousands in the UK,
Yeah, I think you answered my question, because I think the next thing someone would have asked is like, what if I don't want to be a property entrepreneur, but let's say they already have a full-time job and they're just looking for where they should park their money.
Well, I think, honestly, the best thing that I think you can do in terms of get real estate exposure is not actually own the actual asset, is to provide the debt. So, for instance, there's a platform called Easy Money, which is a partnership with Stelios, who owns EasyJet. And on that platform, you can provide bridge lending to people who own property. So, for instance, that's something I do a lot of. Instead of actually finding my own transactions or finding my own deals, I literally upload my capital onto the platform. I get 9.5% paid to me monthly. And when you compound that out, that's like 10.5%, and all you're doing is actually providing capital that's being used to be secured against property on a first charge. So more than 65% loan to value, and you're getting 10% once it's compounded per annum on your money. You can withdraw your money within 24 hours, So there you go, easy money. That's a big shout out to you guys, but free promotion.
I've
but
never heard of that. That
it's
sounds
good. And more now is fractional real estate platforms are emerging. So again, I think that's a really good stepping stone, because often on these platforms, there's Tab Property as an example. You can choose from multiple types of deal. You can download the valuation report. You can, get see what you like, see what you don't like. Oh, I like commercial in Nottingham, right? Or I like prime central London, right? Or I like an HMO in Slough, right? So again, not having to invest £100,000, £50,000, you can invest £10, £100, £1,000, and get comfortable with those different types of assets and how they operate. Which again is a good way, because I think one of the biggest issues of real estate is when people want to invest into real estate, the first mistake they make is they think that real estate is one single asset class, whereas even within residential, there's 100 different ways you can invest into real estate. But the second issue is people then need to invest a huge sum of money to be able to actually get exposure. So it's not, you can buy a pound share or something. You need to go in with £50,000, £100,000. And the issue with that is, even with someone with £100,000, you don't want to put all your capital into one asset. And as many people who have invested for a long time know, there is a skill to be developed in investing. Understand when to hold, to overcome those emotions of fear, to overcome those emotions of greed. And so, you don't want to play around with your life savings on your first ever investment. So again, finding some of these fractional ownership platforms is a useful way of getting exposure to direct deals. Whereas the REIT, as an example, you've got a whole number of assets you don't necessarily have sight of and transparency over. Whereas with these platforms, you're able to actually see the deal that you're investing into. Again, I would definitely wouldn't recommend, and it's not advice, but I wouldn't recommend putting huge sums of money in. It's about learning and getting comfortable with investing into real estate.
That's good. So you're saying on this easy money website, if I had £100 and I uploaded my £100 onto that website, I'd get a 9.5% return on a monthly basis? Or is there a catch to it? You have to upload, let's say, at least 10k or something like that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, depending on the amount of money that you invest, depends on what return you get. So I think over £100,000 you get 9.5, and then it scales down depending on the least amount of money you put in. Yeah.
Still good to know though. So
but the key point is building the knowledge to know how to invest into real estate. So it's not about the amount of money you're putting on and how much you're getting back. It's about getting comfortable and learning and getting exposure as little cost as possible to that asset class. Right, you want to learn you can learn just as much with £1 as you can £1 million. So I always think of it like firing the water through the pipes. Like ultimately you do your piping work, and then you turn the water on, and then just by turning the water on once, you understand where the holes and the leaks are. You can do that with £1 or £1 million. It's better to do it with £1 though, rather than £1 million.
I wish we could dig more into it, but we're going to have to move on to one of the final sections. So I'm going to ask you 3 quick fire questions, and I might add in a little extra one. The first one is, what is the best investment you've ever made?
So the best investment I've ever made wasn't an investment. The best trade I've made was my brother-in-law told me to buy a NFT of Snoop Dogg. I put in £500 and I sold it for 25,000 in less than 6 weeks.
Was that in 2020, 2021?
That was like some crazy timing. My brother-in-law, who's obsessed with crypto, was like, don't sell it, it's going to be worth millions in the future. I said, mate, I am selling this. It's like, that's the best. So yeah, that was probably like one of the best. Although I remember buying Bitcoin in 2012. I still own half a Bitcoin that I bought in 2012. I've lost my password. My mentor I mentioned, I saw him invest £1 million in Bitcoin in 2012.
2012?
In 2012. £1 million in 2012.
Wow.
He lost money on Bitcoin.
From that money he made in 2012?
He lost money.
He sold too early?
He sold too early, he got panicked. The market back then was going like daily. But no, the best investment I ever made was investing my knowledge. Okay. I'm an expert in real estate. There's nothing I don't know about my industry, about my niche within my industry, within my niche of my industry. Like I'm an expert. So having that having that global recognition of your knowledge, of your skill set, is the most valuable thing you can do. Whether you be a scaffolder, whether you be an engineer, whether you be a programmer, whatever it is, just be the best, be the most knowledgeable in your space, and as an effect to that, wealth will come towards you.
I love that. And I love that you gave a practical example first, because one of our most popular response to this is investing in myself. And then someone in the comments was like, can we get something else besides that? But I think it's true, because it has the highest ROI, but it's also that practical thing. But then also the knowledge is, investing in yourself is always.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a broad question. The truth is that people don't know how to invest. You know, people invest into the stock market and then they sell when it's too short. The reason why I mentioned that Bitcoin thing was because it's not about investing. It's about how to invest. It's about knowing how to invest and what's your time horizon. Before you invest, what are you hoping to achieve from this investment? What is your time frame and commitment to this investment? Why are you making the investment? What is your strategy that this investment, what is your life strategy of what you're trying to achieve for yourself? What are you hoping this investment will do to enhance or to help you get closer to your life goals and your life strategy? You know, for me, after I sold my businesses from development trading, I then moved into asset management, long-term, high-yielding assets. Why? Because I got married, I had 2 kids, I wanted to spend time with my family. I knew I couldn't do real estate development where I'm dealing with 5 different problems a day on 5 different assets and running around the place. I wanted to do one deal that was going to pay me less initially, but over time pay me much, much more. But my return on investment of time was much greater, which freed up my life, that I could be with my family, could be with my kids. So first of all, you have a life strategy of what you're trying to achieve, and then you choose your investments to go into your life strategy. You don't make a bunch of investments and then decide how you're going to build your life around your investments. You know, it's like, what am I trying to achieve? How do these investments help me achieve the type of lifestyle I want? For me, freedom, security, and wealth. That's what I want to achieve. And then I choose even the job that I do to help me achieve my goals of freedom, security, and wealth.
I love that. Second one is, what is the biggest money mistake you've ever made?
Buying an NFT. What is the biggest money mistake I've ever made? I think when I was 25, 26, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Getting to that 115 million, gross event value pipeline, I over leveraged on one of our assets. I put too much trust in one of our part of our delivery team, and getting out of that asset was problematic. You know, the amount of headspace a wrong investment takes up is disproportionate to the amount of headspace you save by making a right investment. You know, so making sure that before you go into anything, understanding that the headspace that it takes up, the opportunity cost a bad investment takes up, is hugely problematic to you yourself advancing. I'd be much further along had I not tripped up on that asset.
I find it so interesting that what I'm starting to notice is that a lot of the biggest money mistakes that people refer to, the guests on the podcast, a lot of it is related to people. So like bad hires, not letting go of a hire quickly enough. So that's actually quite interesting. And then the final one. Ooh, did you want to say something?
I mean, that is everything. People is everything. You know, the people who are going to invest into you, the people who are going to work for you, like it is just people. Like, unless when you're asking me, like, what should you invest into? And it's something totally passive, run, some ETF, or BlackRock fund or whatever, or, the S&P. If you're actually investing in business and trying to build wealth through that means, people is everything. And how do you attract better people into your life? You have to be more. You have to push your barriers. You have to overcome your fears. You have to overcome your doubts. You have to build gravitas so that you shine and people come to you. You know, if you say small and you've got small ambitions and you are scared of doing this, you're worried about doing that, and that's not a light that's going to bring the best people around you. The best people bring the best results. That means that you need to be the best you can be. And that's, people ask me, like, where should I start? Go to the gym, get up regularly, 6 a.m., work out, have a balanced diet, and just build a structure around your life where you're both restricting against intaking things that are wrong for you, but also proactively doing positive things that enhance you. If you can build a strong habits around yourself, you build a structure and a foundation on which you can build amazing things from. But if you can't even do that, then what chances have you got to building a business over the next 7 to 10 years?
Good. That's good. And then finally, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is trying to build wealth?
You're not going to like this answer. Because, I think the first thing I would say is, like, wind back your definition of wealth. Like, the greatest wealth that I have in my life is my children. Someone said to me, this is going to be deeply unpopular to say. He was a great teacher of esoteric wisdom. One of the great things that my mentor, my boss, also took me on is that he took me around this tour of some of the greatest esoteric wisdom teachers.
What is esoteric?
Kind of like the mystical.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was in a point of his life where he was struggling, and he also wanted kind of answers from not just the material wealth. And so one of the biggest things that, for me as wealth is my kids. And so a teacher once shared with me, he said, James, life doesn't begin until you have children. And I would go further than that and actually say that when my father died, I'd say life doesn't begin until you have kids and you lose a parent, because or someone close to you, or you care for someone who's very close, because getting that kind of sense of where life begins and life ends, and being a bit more aware of that circle of life, the fragility of it, the finiteness of it, also getting to a point where you love something truly more than yourself and being unconditional with that thing beyond, it put everything into perspective of what mattered to me, what was important to me. And so why it helped me so much was because it also allowed me to detach from making money. I was so attached to making money, so attached to it. And as you hold on to the desire to make more and more money, you get tighter and tighter, and your opportunities, don't sit in your palm. Opportunity comes with an open palm, not a clenched fist. And so, for me, that was the best thing, was actually investing in my relationships, investing in my romantic relationships just as much as my business relationships, because that gave me perspective to actually know what wealth was to me, what was going to be my wealth creation strategy, and how I was going to do it and why. I think a lot of people nowadays fall into a job, they fall into becoming an entrepreneur, they fall into becoming a content creator, and then they're a year in, they're exhausted, they're not making enough money, they don't know why they're doing it, and they burn out. Not even burn out, they just lose their why. They don't know why they're doing it. The secret to success is consistent compounding of doing the same thing right again and again and again. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You will be rich, you will be wealthy if you just do the basic things right and you're constantly compounding your success and your wealth. You fast forward to when you're 60 years old, billionaire by 60. That's where my head's always at. Billionaire by 60. I'm in no rush. Anytime I've been in rush was been in my 20s, and that wasn't a good place to be. So if you want to build wealth, what's my best tip is to invest into all aspects of your life, including romantic relationships, to really understand what wealth creation is and why you're doing it.
I love it. I'm going to ask you something really quickly. When did you start? Because we had the previous guest was kind of like, she was not interested in that until her 30s, like investing in the, And she didn't say that. She just said she didn't give her 20s to a man, which people took as a big uproar, which I like. I like controversy, by the way.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on that?
As in choosing not to give your life
timelines.
Right. I mean, the counter to my point would be, from a male perspective, is, earn your money in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and then when you've made it, go out and see, if you can get into a relationship. I think having a mindset where you choose to place so much control over the most important decision that you make in your life, and therefore being closed all the way until you're ready to be open, is a naive and silly. It's a silly mindset to have.
Yeah,
you should be open to all the wonderful blessings and opportunities that the world wants to throw at you, and not say that because I want something on my timeline, this is how it should be. It's like business doesn't work that way, relationships don't work that way, nothing works that way. Like if you want a life of disappointment, it's a secret of saying, I want this to happen then. And if it doesn't happen then when I want it, I'm unhappy. That's the secret. That is the source of all anger and frustration, is when we want something to happen at a particular point, then we get angry. If we had no attachment to when it happens or if it happens, whatever, like, why would I be unhappy?
That's good. That's
So
good. And actually, I loved your answer that you said I wasn't going to let, because technically you said that my life hasn't started yet, which is great, because that means I'm still 0 years old. So I love it.
I think when I heard that, I was still 26. It would still be like 4 more years. So I got married, 4 more years. So I had my daughter. And so, back then I was like, that's a bit shocking. It's because I trusted the person so much. I was open to it. Right. And while I then look backwards, he was right. But it's, my point is relativity. It's to be conscious that when you are in your 20s, the things that matter so much to you aren't actually the most important things. And to have that awareness so that you don't make stupid decisions by overreaching. Like, you have time. You don't need to take ridiculous risk. You don't need to throw yourself into stupid situations or take out a lot of debt to go do ABC. You just like, you got time, you know? And I think there's such, you know, especially when I was growing up, you know, Mark Zuckerberg just became a billionaire and WhatsApp just sold for £1 billion and Instagram sold, you know, you had all these teenagers and 20-year-olds, you know, becoming billionaires overnight. And suddenly because of social media, you think, oh my God, like to be successful, I need to be a billionaire by the time I'm 25, right? And we had a lot of, you know, and I think that was a driving force to where I got to by the time I was 30. But all I'd say is that I don't think I would have taken so much risk. I think I would have been more careful about the investments and the deals that I did in my 20s if I didn't feel I had to become a billionaire by 30. Not that I did become a billionaire by 30, but that was the mindset. And I think if I let go a little bit more and been a bit more patient and had this new mindset of billionaire by 60, that I would have made more intelligent decisions and I would have got wealthier faster. It's the hare and the tortoise.
Interesting. I want to dig into it, but we've run out of time.
Sure.
So if somebody did want to get more information from, I'm sure people are going to love this and going to want to, I don't know if you have a book or this or that, where can they find you? Where can they get more?
Sure. So James Gerrard on Instagram is our hub. That's the place to look out for us. And we have plans for YouTube content shortly, but currently Instagram is the place to find us.
Okay.
Or
amazing.
TikTok.
TikTok. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. This was great.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.